Hello, everyone. This is the final video for our course this term on Chapter 14, interviewing. We are going to do mock interviews to here at the end of the semester. And so I'm giving you some pointers here. The most important thing I'm going to try to give you is some tips on challenging questions. And interviews are challenging. They are. So interviewing can be stressful and scary, but the best ways to combat that is one, know what to expect, like anticipate kinds of questions you're going to be asked, and two, to prepare to practice. And that's why we're going to do that here at the end of the term. It's something you really can get better at, just like anything else. And I'm speaking from experience. The more you practice, the more confident you're going to be going into an interview. Latest trends in interviewing. One is early stage screening by technology, so telephone and webcam. I just had a student who interviewed with a local company. So like some place he could have easily been in person, and he had to do the first round interview on phone with someone at like a headquarters type location before he could get an in-person interview in the local location. So that's a really real thing. And part of it is, for example, here at MSU Northern, if we are doing a round of interviews, we can't have, it's not equitable to have, or fair, to have some people come in person and some people be on the phone. And if we're not going to pay for everyone to come here, no matter what distance they're at, then we have to interview all the first round people by phone or like a Zoom. So that's why that's happening. Longer multiple interviews. I have heard this from several of my friends who are currently on the job market, that they're going through multiple rounds of interviews. On the spot interviewing, if you're at a job fair or something like that, this is why it's really great to have your one-page resume that someone can quickly scan, and they might set up something with you right there, which would be awesome. Also, psychometric and skill tests. So depending on the job, they might ask you, have you take a test that helps them to gauge, are you a good fit for this job? Behavioral and situational questions, like some of my students who went to law enforcement, for example, take those tests. Behavioral and situational questions. Tell me about a time when you were going to look at some examples of those. And this is where it's great to have those stories that you came up with in the raw material for your job search that I had you come up with. And I said, hey, this would be a great story to tell in an interview. That's what you want. Group interviews, I honestly have not seen this, with the exception of some of my friends who went to medical school. It was just a really mean, quite frankly, mean thing that they did, was have all these candidates. You'd have them in a room and ask a question. It was almost like Jeopardy, who could answer the question first. I don't think it's very effective. I haven't heard of anyone else using it. They're just trying to weed people out for medical school. Okay, goals of the job applicant. You want to convince the employer of your potential, expand on the information in your resume. So anything that's on your resume is fair game. They might ask you about. That's why you shouldn't put anything on your resume that is not really true, right? Or that you can't really back up. You are also there to evaluate the organization as a potential workplace. If you see kind of red flags popping up everywhere, you think, I don't want to work here, right? That's really good information for you to have, whether you get a job offer or not, right? To learn more about the job and the company, and to decide whether this job really meets your career goals. So you're also evaluating them. It's important to remember you're scanning, right, as you're um, doing the interview process. The goals of the recruiter. Someone in one of my face-to-face classes said to me recently, well, when I go into an interview, I just act like I'm having a conversation with a friend. I said, wow, stop. No, be really careful, because this person is not your friend. Hopefully they're going to be friendly. I have actually been in interviews where people were not friendly, and that was a big red flag to me, that what is going on at this company, right? That they can't be friendly in the interview process. I probably don't want to be involved in this, whatever it is. But so they're probably going to be friendly, but they're not your friend. You are being evaluated. They are scrutinizing you to see, should you move on, right, in this interview process or to the job position. So you have to keep your guard on. You have to keep your wits about you. Again, I'm not saying you can't be friendly, but don't act as if they're your friend. They're trying to find out what drives and motivates you. They're trying to learn more about your training experience and qualifications. And really, they're trying to decide, do you check all these boxes, right? Are you a good fit? So that I can move you forward. So just know they have to be evaluating you. That's their job. So you just keep that in mind, so that you're not doing something, right, that just isn't appropriate, right, for an interview situation. We'll talk about some of those things are in a second. So preparing for a video interview, we are going to do Zoom interviews because I want you to have that experience. It's a really good experience to have. You want to practice, make sure that you know what the job is that you're applying for. Practice with your tech. When I interviewed for the job at MSU Northern, it was during the pandemic, and I actually did do the entire interview process on Zoom, which was a scene, let me tell you. But not that they were bad, it was just weird to do it all on Zoom. And I practiced. I Zoomed my husband, he was downstairs, and I had him tell me anything that was going on that was distracting. He could hear me rustling some of my papers where I had notes. And I was like, okay, I don't want that to happen right during the interview. So I changed my setup. Um, and make sure you're just practicing giving your answers. If you have a dog, a cat, a goldfish, a mirror, any of those pets or objects would be happy to listen to you give your questions. If you're waiting in line, even at McDonald's, sit in your car waiting in line, why not practice some of your answers? Practice saying them. It might sound okay in your head until you say it out loud. So it's really important to practice. When for the video interview, I just want to make sure, I know sometimes the only quiet place you have in your house is like a closet or a bathroom, but you don't want like clothes hanging around your head or a toilet in the background, right? It's just awkward and weird. So go make a free Zoom account and learn how to blur your background, right? Or put in a different background. That's not like a Game of Thrones background. You know what I'm saying? Something that's bland and professional. And I know I have dogs that will bark, right? You might have children that'll cry. So try to be somewhere where turn your phone off. Try to be somewhere where you can, or unless you're on your phone, but you turn the ringer off so that you can not have that distraction. I'm not requiring you to dress any certain way for a 15-minute interview. I don't think that's logical. But when you're really right in the interview situation, remember they can see you from here to here, right? So you want to be wearing something that's going to be professional. And this is true. I have had students do interviews with the like if they have 50 bangles on their arm and they make a lot of noise, right? That can be really distracting, and you may not even realize, right? That's a thing. So that's why it's good to think about all those things before you get in the interview situation. Practice, we're going to do that. Practicing your answers and sounding like you're not reading from a script. That's a great idea. And really developing a couple of those stories that you don't know exactly what questions you're going to be asked, but one story might work for time you exhibited leadership, time you worked with a team, time you solved a problem, right? So that's why it's so great to have maybe 3 stories that you're like, I'm going to work this in somewhere. And it becomes a little bit of a game, right? You can see how can I work this in? Before the interview, we talked about practicing, understanding the process, dressing professionally, taking a breath, right? And remembering that interview is a two-way street. Those are all good points. So what do you do during an interview? Control your body movements. That's not so much a problem if you're on a phone or a Zoom interview, but practice, looking at the camera, practice using gestures effectively, practice appearing friendly, right? Smiling and listening attentively. We talked about turning off electronic devices. Don't chew gum. I think that's probably obvious. I wouldn't worry too much about the like, and basically. Those are going to come out somewhat, and I don't want you to stress out too much about that. We did have a candidate several semesters ago, though, I will tell you, that started every single answer like this. I'd have to say, and I don't know if this person spoke that way all the time or they were really nervous. I don't know what was happening, but it was very distracting. But that was extreme. That's the only time I've ever seen that, as a matter of fact. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. If you practice your answers, you will be fine. Be confident, but not cocky, not overly right confident. This is a really important question that you often get asked. Tell me about yourself. They don't want to know, I was born in Fargo, North Dakota on a snowy night, right? And they don't want to know that. I'm being kind of silly, but I have had students go all the way back to like their birth, right? This question, and they're asking you about you in a professional context. So here's a template that I'm giving you that actually is from the book that you can use, and you don't have to use this word for word, but you can use this as a starting point for your answer. So I've completed an English PhD with a major in rhetoric and composition. Recently, I worked for Montana State University Northern as an associate professor of English, teaching literature and writing. Before that, I worked for Buena Vista University as an associate professor of English, teaching writing and literature. My strengths are helping students see their full potential, even if they don't initially see themselves as writers, and helping students write in a wide variety of modes, from creative writing to technical editing. That's the kind of thing that you want to do. You're giving them a succinct summary, right, of your qualifications, right, who you are as a professional. What you like to do in your spare time? What was your college major? What are your greatest strengths? Do you prefer to work with yourself or by yourself or with others? This one's a tricky one. I think it's a trick question. I'm telling you right now, the only answer you can give is both. I enjoy doing both because there's really no job where you're always by yourself or you're always in a group, right? You have to be able to work with others. So what I would do is say, oh, both. And as an example, here's a time when I completed a work independently. And here's an example of a time when I completed work with a team, right? And just give two quick examples. All they want to know is that you're going to be the kind of person who can get along with others on the job and who can also be trusted, right, to do work on your own. You have to say both. I know we all probably have, depending on the situation, a preference, maybe one way or the other, but just forget about that for right now and just say both. I'm just telling you, that's the way to go. Why do you want to work here? You should know a reason why this particular position appeals to you. So for example, we have a lot of nurses in this class. Why do you want to work in the emergency department versus, in an elder care situation versus, right, be a telephone nurse, whatever, all the different possibilities, be able to say why. Same thing as a diesel technician. Why do you want to work in a shop? Why do you want to work in the field? Why do you want to work in a mine? You should be able to say that, because if they know you're enthusiastic about this particular job, that's going to set you apart. They're going to be happy about that. Why you're interested in this position is kind of similar. What you know about our company. You should know some good things that you can talk about. If you know about trainings that they give, if you know about what's their best products or services, right? That would be great to be able to talk about. They want to know, did you do your homework? Why should we hire you when we have applicants with more experience or better credentials? So a few semesters ago, I had a student, we'll call him Kevin, who said he had this question in an interview, and he said, well, obviously you thought I was qualified or you wouldn't have asked me in here for an interview. And I said, whoa, time out. And this was a very nice person, very nice student. But if I hadn't known him and I had been the interviewer and gotten that response from him, I'd have thought, whoa, this is a person with a hairpin trigger. This is a person who's kind of aggressive, right? That's not good. So the reality is you don't know who else is an applicant. So what they really want to know is, it's kind of another way of asking, what's your strengths? One way of thinking about this, I might tell you, is if you're a recent graduate and you might be up against someone who has 10 years experience at another company, one way you could answer this is you could say, I'm just starting out in my career. I'm really excited to learn things. I want to know how to do things the John Deere way or the Cigna Health way, right? Or whatever, because your open-mindedness and your willingness to kind of be open, right, to their way of doing things can be a real strength. You're also probably up on the latest developments in your field. You can talk about that. So there are a lot of things you can talk about. Focus on what's best about you. Why did you leave your last position? You're not going to get asked that if you're just graduating from college and you're really just starting your career. So I wouldn't worry about that if this is going to be your first real job in this career, because it's obvious. If you are leaving a position, the one thing I'll say is if something bad has happened at the previous place, you got to set that behind you, right? Don't let some negative thing from the past ruin your future with this new company. So you can say something like, while X and such was a great job for me, where I learned this, this, and this, I'm ready for new challenges such as this and this, right, at your company. I will tell you, when I applied for this job here, because I was already a tenured professor at another university, and the university was in financial ruin. So I was actually upfront, and I explained, I have 20 plus years left in my career. I wanted to work and help students. And unfortunately, I don't think that this university is going to remain in business. I didn't badmouth anybody, even though I had some, as you can imagine, some negative things to say about how things had been managed. But that I had to say to myself, don't let that destroy, right, what you could have at a new place. You got to put that behind you and don't let it poison, right? The next thing. I'm speaking from experience that you got to stay positive, stay optimistic. Where do you expect to be 5 or 10 years from now? Okay, so I had a student, we'll call him Kevin, who answered this question and said, I have no idea. I don't have a crystal ball or a time machine. Oh my gosh. Okay. None of us have a crystal ball or time machine. That's true. But all they're asking, what they really want to know is, are you someone who's going to want to stick with this company? They don't want to spend the time and energy and money, quite frankly, to train someone who's just going to go leave and go somewhere else. So you don't want to say something like, I'm going to learn everything I can from you, and then I'm going to go start my own business. Starting your own business is a great goal. You can have that goal. Absolutely. But don't say that in the interview. That's none of their business. Don't tell them that. So think about what's a logical progression at their business. Do you hope to be a shop supervisor? Do you hope to be, I don't know what the nurse equivalent is, a nurse supervisor, whatever. Like, how do you expect to move up in the company and to contribute? That's really what they want to know. If you say an answer along those lines, you're in good shape. How do you keep current with what's happening in your profession? Have one thing you can say. Is there a website? Is there a publication? Is there a trade show? What do you stay in touch with that helps you keep up to date? How do you think you can contribute? Again, you can talk about your skills. And do you plan to continue your education? Please don't say, oh my gosh, no, I'm so ready to be done graduating. I know you're ready to be done. That's fine. But they don't even mean get another degree. They mean, are you going to be a lifelong learner? Right? Are you going to keep going? So you could say, I may not be continuing my education formally, but I certainly plan to, learn new programs and new whatever, right, procedures as they come up. So say that you're someone who's willing to learn. That's what they really want to know. Describe your ideal work environment, tailor it to whatever job you're looking at. Is it a small family-owned shop? Is it a major corporation? What is your greatest weakness? This is also another tricky one. Here's my advice. Pick something that is truly weakness, but not a deal breaker, and that you have been working on. So, for example, I've had people in the past have some good answers about time management. Maybe you've struggled with time management, but you've developed some strategies, right, to do better on that. Perfect. Talk about that. I had a student, we'll call him Kevin. He had a great answer where his grandfather had all his tools in the shop and all his parts were everywhere and it was a mess. And the grandfather could never find what he's looking for and would often end up repurchasing parts that he already had. And it made the student, Kevin, realize, hey, I don't want to be like this. I got to organize my stuff, right? I got to have a system. And so that inspired him. So even though it was his grandfather's weakness, right, he kind of took it upon himself, right, to find a solution. I had another student, we'll call Kevin, who had a fear of heights. And he had a great answer where he talked about how he knew this was an issue when he was going into something in the trades and he might have to be up on scaffolding and catwalks and what have you. And so he said what he did was in his jobs that he'd had thus far, he had made sure he was the one who went up on the ladder. He was the one who worked on the scaffolding because he wanted to overcome that. And he did. He was well on his way to overcoming that. That was fabulous. It showed him taking initiative, right? Doing something positive for a fear that's no one's fault, right? It's a very common fear. So you get my drift. Pick something that you can talk about how you've addressed. How do you define success? They don't really want to hear about like family and housing and stuff like that. Talk about success on the job. And think about that could look like a lot of different things. Like if you're a nurse, does that have to do with your patient? Does it have to do with your nursing team? If you're a diesel mechanic, what does it have to do with your customers? Does it have to do with how the shop functions? You can decide, but it's whatever's positive you can say about your specific situation. Salary. I'm not going to ask you about salary. I'm just telling you up front. And here's my advice. Don't talk about salary in the interview. Don't let them pull you into talking about salary because your strong place for negotiating salary is after you have a job offer. You don't want to say, oh, I presently make $45,000 because then they're going to say, oh, we could hire this person for less, right? Then we were going to pay them. And you don't want to overestimate it either. So what I would say is, how much do you presently make? If your job has nothing to do with the one you're applying for, you can say, well, my job, at McDonald's does not really apply to the correct salary, right, for the diesel technician job. If your job is in the same vein, you can say, well, I would rather talk about that once we're at the stage of the job offer and we can think about comparable living expenses, right, et cetera. Yeah, I would just deflect. That's my main thing that I'm saying. Don't talk about the money during the interview part. Situational question. So this is a tricky, this one my brother actually did get asked. My brother's a diesel mechanic, and he was asked, if you were aware that a coworker was falsifying data, what would you do? So here's what I would suggest. You can say that first you would talk to the person directly, because maybe there's a misunderstanding. Maybe they didn't lie in their report. My brother was looking at pre-owned vehicles. You know what I'm saying? They're calling them pre-owned or certified or something, but they're really used cars. Okay. So he has to sign off on all the things. And he said, if someone were signing off on something that really had a problem with it, first he would go to them and point out the issue, right? Because maybe it could be resolved. Oh my gosh, you're right. I overlooked that, right? I missed that, or I didn't check the right box, whatever. And then if that doesn't work, go to the supervisor, right? There's a point at which, as a employee, things are not your problem. You can elevate it to the next level. And you can also say, I would follow the protocol that's, laid out by the company. Whatever the chain of command is, I would follow it. That's, what they want to know. You're going to be an honest person, right? And you're going to handle it as professionally as possible. This describe a time when you solved a difficult problem. That's where those stories, that's where I want you to get into the stories. We're going to have another slide here that talks about how to do this. Okay. So using the STAR technique to answer the questions. So first, briefly explain the background and context of the situation. I was working for what company, we were doing this kind of job, right? So first, just quickly set it up so that the person's not playing catch up, right? Trying to figure out what you're talking about. Then describe the problem. The tractor is stuck in the mud, right? Whatever it is. Then the action. What did you do? You tried this. It didn't work. You tried that. It didn't work. You came up with a third way it worked, right? Whatever you did, right? However you solved it. And you can also talk about, if you have a good result, that's great. You can also talk about, for these, sometimes something goes wrong. Sometimes I'll ask you what's a mistake you made or time when something went wrong. And it's okay to have made a mistake. It's okay to have been in a situation where something went wrong. The key to those is you want to say what you learned from it. Like one of my students, who we'll call Kevin, who did drive a tractor, like got stuck in a soft spot in a field, said he had learned from that. Boy, he was really going to check, right? The next time he drove a piece of large equipment, that the path he was going to take it on was dry and sound and could hold the weight of it. So that was a really good lesson. He wasn't going to do that again. And so that could be a very positive thing, right, for a potential employer to know. These questions are illegal and inappropriate. I'm not going to ask you them, so you don't have to worry about these for our interview situation. And what I would say is, again, deflect it. So what is your marital status, or do you have kids or anything? I would say that has no bearing on the work I can do for you. Let's talk about more about the job, right? Or rather focus on this position. Just deflect. You don't have to talk about it. You do want to have a couple questions in your pocket to ask the person. I'm not going to have you do this in the interview since I don't have any further information about the company you're applying for, but asking them what a typical day would be like, what training programs they have available, what kind of travel there is, who would be your supervisor, can I take a tour, right? All those things would be good things to ask. And then you want to end on a strong point. So thank them, ask them, always ask them at the end what their timeline is for the search. So if they say, yes, we're continuing to conduct interviews over the next 2 weeks, and then we're going to contact finalists, you then know, right? You have a timeline. Then if you haven't heard from them in 2 weeks, it's perfectly fine to email them or call and say, hello, I interviewed for this job on such and such point. I just wanted to check on the status of the search. But then right? It's an appropriate time to do that. So finding out the timeline, it helps you. So and it shows your real interest too. So it's a good thing. Most outrageous interview behavior. Oh my gosh. So we talked about not talking about the ways your previous employer angered you, hugging the hiring manager. I don't know why anyone would do that unless it was your aunt or something. Ate all the candy in the candy bowl. No. Blew her nose in tissues and lined up at the table. That's gross. Threw his beer can outside in the trash can before coming in the office. I actually had, my dad was interviewing someone to be an EMT, and the person arrived for the training hungover and was unable to even hold their hand steady to sign a paper, and the person did not get to continue in the process. So that things like that unfortunately do happen. Oh, have a friend come in and ask how much longer. Don't bring your friend, don't bring your mom, because you want to stand on your own and these things and not have them interrupt or say something weird like that, right? And not be helpful. Okay. So there will be a sign up sheet on Brightspace where you need to sign up for an interview slot. If none of those slots work for you, I know people are working various different hours, just email me and we'll set something up. I'm perfectly happy to work with you on that. I just, since I can't anticipate what everyone's work schedules are, I put some slots on there, but I'm absolutely willing to work with you on that. Thanks so much, everybody. And I hope you have a good end of the term. I hope you have a good, Thanksgiving and a good finals week.